Hello, second grade. Time for Charlotte's Web. We are on chapter 14 already. We are on page 105, and there's 184 pages. This chapter is very short. I think it's only 6 pages, so I'll tell you the page number when we're done if you want to subtract and send it to me. The last time I read, Charlotte was working on the next word, which is radiant. So I hope you looked up on dictionary.com or used your iPad or tablet to find what the word radiant means. This is chapter 14 again, and it is titled Dr. Dorian. So it has something to do with a doctor. Here we go. The next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink, drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arble worked silently. She hoped Fern would go out and play with other children, instead of always heading for the Zuckerman's barn to sit and watch farm animals. Charlotte is the best storyteller I have ever heard, said Fern, poking her dish towel into a cereal bowl to dry it. Fern, her mother said sternly, you must not invent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't even talk. Charlotte can, replied Fern. She doesn't talk very loud, but she talks. What kind of stories does she tell? Asked Mrs. Arble. Well, began Fern, she told us about a cousin of hers who caught a fish in her spider's web. Don't you think that is fascinating? Fern, dear, how would a fish get in a spider's web? Said Mrs. Arble. You know it can't happen. You're making all of this up. Oh, it happened all right, replied Fern. Charlotte never fibs. This cousin of hers built a web across a stream, and one day she was hanging around on the web and a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. The fish was caught by one fin. Mother, its tail was wildly thrashing in the sun. Can't you just see the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish? Charlotte's cousin kept sipping in, dodging out. She was beaten mercilessly over the head by the wild thrashing fish. She kept moving in to wrap more thread around it and dancing out to not get hit. Fern, snapped her mother, stop it. Stop inventing wild tales. I'm not inventing anything, said Fern. I'm telling you the facts. What finally happened? Asked her mother, whose curiosity got the better of her. Well, Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped the fish up, and then she ate him when she was good and ready. Spiders have to eat. They're just like the rest of us. Yes, I suppose they do, said Mrs. Arble. Charlotte has another cousin who's called a balloonist. She stands on her head and lets out lots of line, and then is carried aloft by the wind. Mother, wouldn't you love to be carried away by the wind? Yes, I actually would, come to think of it, replied Mrs. Arble. But Fern, darling, I wish today you would just play outside instead of going to Uncle Homer's barn. Why don't you find some friends? Why don't you play outside with your friends? You're spending way too much time in that barn. It's not good for you to be alone so much. Alone? Said Fern. Alone? My best friends are in the barn. It's a very sociable place. Isn't it lonely? Fern disappeared after a while. She walked down the road toward Zuckerman's. Her mother dusted the living room, and as she worked, she kept thinking about her daughter, Fern. It didn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals. Finally, Mrs. Arble made up her mind. She was going to call the doctor, Dr. Dorian, and ask for his advice. She got in the car and drove to his office. His building was in town. Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was glad to see Mrs. Arble. He gave her a comfortable chair to sit in. This is about Fern, she explained. Fern spends entirely too much time at the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits on a stool in the corner of the barn near the pig pen and she watches the animals hour after hour. She just sits and listens. Dr. Dorian leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "How enchanting," he said. "It must be so nice and quiet in the barn." "Homer has sheep, doesn't he?" "Yes," said Mrs. Arble. "But it all started with that pig we let Fern raise by feeding it a bottle. She named him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and ever since the pig left our place, Fern goes to the farm to be near it. And I've been hearing things about that pig," said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. "I've heard he's quite a pig." "Have you heard about the words that appeared in the spider's web?" asked Miss Arble nervously. "Yes," replied the doctor. "Well, do you understand them?" asked Mrs. Arble. "Understand what?" "Do you understand how there could be writing in a spider's web?" "Oh, no," said Dr. Dorian. "I don't understand it. But for that matter, I don't understand how a spider can even spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said it was a miracle. But nobody pointed out that a spider being able to spin a web is a miracle itself." "What's so miraculous about a spider's web?" asked Mrs. Arble. "I don't see why you're saying a spider's web is a miracle. It's just a web." "Did you ever try to spin a spider web?" asked Dr. Dorian. Mrs. Arble shifted nervously in her chair. "No, but I can sew a scarf. I can also knit a hat." "Sure," said the doctor, "but somebody taught you, didn't they?" "Yeah, my mom taught me how to sew and how to knit." "Well, who taught a spider? A young spider knows how to spin a web without any instructions from anybody. Isn't that miraculous?" "I suppose so," said Mrs. Arble. "I don't understand how those words got in the web. I don't understand it. And when I don't understand something, I don't like it." "Well, none of us like things we don't understand," said Dr. Dorian, sighing. "I'm a doctor, and doctors are supposed to understand everything about the human body. But I don't understand everything about the human body, and I can't let it bother me." Mrs. Arble fidgeted in her chair. "Fern said the animals talk to each other. Dr. Dorian, do you believe that animals can talk to each other?" "Well, I've never heard an animal say anything," he replied, "but that doesn't prove anything. It's quite possible that an animal has spoken to me, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, and that's why I didn't understand. Children pay attention better than grown-ups. If Fern says the animals in Mr. Zuckerman's barn are talking, I probably would believe her. Perhaps if people talked less, animals might talk more. People are incessant talkers. I'll give you my word on that." "Well, I guess I feel better about Fern then," said Mrs. Arble. "So you don't think I should worry about her?" "How does she look? Does she look well?" asked the doctor. "Oh, yes." "Is she eating well?" he asked. "Perfect. She's always hungry." "Does she sleep well at night?" "Oh, yes." "Then don't worry about her," said the doctor. "Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pig, sheep, geese, and spiders?" "How old is Fern?" "She's 8 years old." "Well," said Dr. Dorian, "I think she will probably always have a love of animals. But I doubt that she spends her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn." "How about boys? Does she play with any boys?" "Yes, she knows a boy named Henry," said Mrs. Arble. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes, and he went into a deep thought. "Henry," he said, remarkable. I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern play with her friends if she wants to, or go to the barn and play with her animal friends if she wants to. I would say that spiders and pigs are about as interesting as people are. Yet I predict that one day it will come when even even she will want to play with some other people. That friends will catch Fern's attention and she won't be in the barn anymore. It's amazing the changes a child goes through from year to year. "How's her brother doing, Avery?" he asked, opening his eyes. "Oh, Avery," chuckled Mrs. Arble. "Avery is always fine. Of course, he gets his poison ivy every year, and he gets stung by wasps and bees, and he always has a frog in his pocket, and a snake in his other pocket, and he breaks everything he touches, but he's just fine." "Good," said the doctor. Mrs. Arble said goodbye. She thanked Dr. Dorian very much for his advice. She felt much better about Fern. She was relieved. It's the end of that chapter. It was a quick one. We're on page 112, and there was a picture. Here's Mrs. Arble, and there's Dr. Dorian when he was leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed, thinking. I think those were the only two pictures. Yes. So I will see you tomorrow, second grade, to read chapter 15 called The Crickets. Ooh, that sounds interesting. All right, have a great day. Bye, second grade.